this edition of News Today, a series in which we discuss and briefly analyze the important news of the day. Let's have a look at today's main headlines. Centre extends Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana for another 5 years to 2028. According to a study, from filing FIRs to convictions, women's cases tend to lag longer than men in India. Bhutan King's visit to India commences with arrival in Assam. Court in Hague rejects Indian government plea against compensation to Devas investors. World Meteorological Organization releases State of Climate Services report for 2023. Loss and Damage Transitional Committee reached an agreement for the design of a new loss and damage fund. Starting with today's first news, the centre has extended the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana for another 5 years to 2028. The Yojana was launched this year to provide free-of-cost food grains for a year under the National Food Security Act of 2013. It should be noted that this scheme is different from the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana that was launched in 2020 as a pandemic relief measure. Now let's discuss the scheme in more detail. The scheme was launched under the Section 3 of National Food Security Act of 2013. Its main aim is to provide rice, wheat and coarse grains free of cost to families belonging to Antyodaya Ann Yojana and priority households categories. Priority households are identified by state government or union territory administrations as per criteria evolved by them. Antyodaya Ann Yojana families are identified by states and UTs as per criteria prescribed by the central government. The scheme subsumed two subsidy schemes of the Department of Food and Public Distribution, the Food Subsidy to Food Corporation of India and the Food Subsidy for Decentralized Procurement. The Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution is responsible for the implementation of the scheme. The scheme offers a multitude of benefits. For example, it provides free food to around 80 crores people and ensures nutrition security in India. However, its implementation does not come without challenges. The scheme comes with a high cost of subsidy, with the subsidy even going against WTO commitments. And we are still facing issues with the identification of beneficiaries. Moving on, according to a recent study, from filing FIRs to convictions, women's cases tend to lag longer than men in India. A pioneering study by London School of Economics professor found that discrimination happens against women at every stage of police and judicial processes. Let's take a look at some other key findings of the study. According to the study, men who file cases on behalf of a female face fewer burdens and exclusions than a woman complainant. Moreover, registration of FIR for violence against women cases are delayed 2 hours longer than other complaints. The study also points out that women's complaints are less likely to proceed from police to the judiciary. Also, conviction rates in cases of female complainants is 5% compared to approximately 18% for male counterparts. As per the study, the reason for such conviction disparities are due to the notion that women often misuse protective legislations like Domestic Violence Act or rape laws. Further, women's complaints like dowry issues can be seen as a threat to societal norms in marriage, and gender disparities in education and workforce participation can also impact access to justice for women. Unfortunately, single-stage policy interventions like creating more police stations or fast-track courts may not address these disparities. Now the question is, what can be done to eliminate the ongoing discrimination against women? The study recommends charting multi-stage discrimination as it helps identify how disparities accumulate and where problem occurs. To enhance access to justice for women, India has taken various initiatives like Mission Shakti, which has two sub-schemes, Sambal and Samarthya. The Sambal component focuses on women's safety and security, encompassing one-stop center, women helpline, Beti Bachao Beti Padhao and Nari Adalats. Further, under the Legal Services Authorities Act of 1987, legal aid is provided free of cost to women in India. Also, the Pink Booth initiative by Delhi Police is aimed at boosting security for cities' women and girls and offering guidance to them.
Moving on, the Bhutan King's visit to India commences with arrival in Assam. India and Bhutan established formal diplomatic relations in 1968 based on the Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation of 1949, which was subsequently revised in 2007. Let's have a look at India-Bhutan relationship in details. In the economic sphere, the bilateral trade reached $1.42 billion in 2021-22, accounting for 80% of Bhutan's overall trade. Also, India is Bhutan's top import and export destination. Plus, the Trade, Commerce and Transit Agreement of 2016 establishes free trade regime between India and Bhutan and allows Bhutan duty-free transit of goods to and from other countries. In the developmental sphere, India provides scholarships to the Bhutanese students, supports Bhutan's Galsang project for skill development, helps in sectors like health and agriculture. India has also constructed 4 major hydroelectric projects in Bhutan and purchases power generated in Bhutan, which significantly boosts Bhutan's revenue. Also, in the cultural domain, the Bhutanese pilgrims visit Bodh Gaya, Rajgir, Nalanda and other Buddhist sites in India. Additionally, some new areas of cooperation like the launch of RuPay and the Bhim app in Bhutan, plus the joint development of India-Bhutan satellite have also emerged recently. Having said this, certain key challenges also exist. Bhutan is a landlocked buffer country between China and India. While Bhutan does not have diplomatic ties with China, the ongoing Bhutan-China border discussions on the Doklam Plateau are a concern for India. The Doklam Tri-Junction cuts very close to India's Siliguri corridor, which is a narrow area connecting the northeastern states to the rest of India.
In our next news, the court in Hague has rejected the Indian government plea against the compensation awarded by the UN Commission on International Trade Law Tribunal to Devas investors. First, let's discuss what is the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, or UNCITRAL. It is the core legal body of the UN system in the field of international trade law, with its secretariat located in Vienna. Its mandate is to remove legal obstacles to international trade by progressively modernizing and harmonizing trade law. The Commission carries out its work at annual sessions held in alternate years in New York and Vienna. Its members are elected for a term of 6 years, and currently India is a member. An award made under UNCITRAL arbitration rules is binding on all parties to the proceeding. Coming back to the news, let's take a look at the background of India's plea. Mauritius investors of Devas Multimedia were awarded $111 million in compensation by the UNCITRAL tribunal over a failed 2005 deal with Antrix Corp, which is the commercial arm of ISRO. Under the deal, ISRO was supposed to lease 2 communication satellites for 12 years to Devas Multimedia. The cabinet terminated the agreement due to security reasons in the year 2011. The Indian government then approached the District Court of Hague for cancellation of the UNCITRAL award, citing a 2022 Indian Supreme Court order. The Supreme Court under this order had ruled for the liquidation of Devas Multimedia on the charge of fraud. The case highlights the importance of arbitration laws. Having said this, let's take a look at arbitration laws in India. India's Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996 was last amended in 2021 and has been modeled on lines of the UNCITRAL framework of laws. It aims to modernize Indian arbitration law and bring it in line with the best global practices and also make India a global hub for arbitration. Also, the New Delhi International Arbitration Center Act of 2019 established New Delhi International Arbitration Center in India, which was later renamed as the India International Arbitration Center.
In another news, the World Meteorological Organization releases the State of Climate Services Report for 2023. WMO is an intergovernmental organization and a specialized agency of the UN. It is headquartered in Geneva and has 193 members, including India. Coming back to the report, this year the annual report focuses on health. Let's have a look at the key highlights of the report. Starting with the impact of climate change, the report says that climate change may reverse decades of progress towards better health, particularly in the most vulnerable communities. Speaking of the financing gap for air pollution, which is the fourth biggest killer by health risk factor, yet only 2% of the international climate finance commitments go to tackle it. Also, the report says that there is underutilization of climate information. Herein, 74% of national meteorological and hydrological services provide climate data to health actors, but utilization of these data remains very limited. Additionally, climate services for health, which includes collaboration among partners to identify access, generate and use reliable climate knowledge for better health decisions, have been facing certain issues like the research and knowledge gaps, lack of access to sufficient local meteorological observations, and insufficient human and institutional capacity. Having said this, there are certain recommendations to tackle the issue. There is a need for tailored climate information and services to support the health sector. This can be achieved through developing in-country capacities to improve local knowledge, policy mandates for health and meteorological actors to collaborate, and raising awareness about the importance of climate information. In another news, the Loss and Damage Transitional Committee reached an agreement for the design of a new loss and damage fund. Loss and damage refers to the negative consequences that arise from the unavoidable risks of climate change, like rising sea levels and prolonged heat waves. In this context, the purpose of Loss and Damage Fund is to assist developing countries that are vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change in responding to economic as well as non-economic losses and the associated damage. It is designed on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. At the Sharm el-Sheikh Climate Conference in 2022, the countries decided to set up a dedicated fund for loss and damage and a transitional committee for designing the fund. The Transitional Committee is a 24-member team of negotiators from developed and developing countries. However, there were differences on the location and the source of funding for the fund. The blueprint of Loss and Damage Fund will be formally adopted at the COP28 UN Climate Summit to be held in Dubai later this year. Let's have a look at the design of the Loss and Damage Fund. It will be administered by the World Bank as a World Bank hosted financial intermediary fund for an interim period of 4 years. The developing countries gave up their demand for establishing the Loss and Damage Fund as a standalone fund. Also, the developed countries are urged to contribute to the fund, while developing countries are being encouraged to contribute to it. The place in the news for today is Nepal. Recently, India offered assistance to Nepal amidst the earthquake. Nepal, with its capital Kathmandu, is a landlocked country. It is bounded by India in the east, south, and the west, and Tibet Autonomous Region of China in its north. Coming to the geographical features, it is home to the 8 of the world's highest mountains and harbors the Mahabharata Range and the Great Himalayan Range of Himalayas. Its highest point is Mount Everest, and its major rivers are Gandak, Karnali, and Kosi.
As we conclude today's main news, let's go through some quick updates. The Ministry of Defence has approved the extension of the rules for maternity, childcare, and child adoption leaves for women soldiers in the armed forces. Now, women in all ranks of the armed forces will be granted maternity leave on par with their civilian counterparts. Scientists in Japan have developed a new version of plastic called VPR, which is based on an epoxy resin V-trimmer. It is partially biodegradable and stronger and stretchier than the traditional version. Indian researchers have developed a two-step polymerase chain reaction-based assay for H. pylori bacteria. It can help detect the bacterial infection and identify clarithromycin-resistant bacteria in 7 hours. The Election Commission of India designed in-house software for complete candidate and election management through ANCOR. It is an end-to-end application for returning officers to digitize the votes polled, tabulate the round-wise data, and then take out various statutory reports of counting. Jal Jeevan Mission has enhanced tap water connection in rural areas from 16% in 2019 to 70% in November 2023. The mission envisioned to provide safe and adequate drinking water through functional household tap connections by 2024 to all households in rural India. Researchers at the Laboratory for the Conservation of Endangered Species developed a new method for assessing total biodiversity. Researchers can assess the total biodiversity by sequencing eDNA of samples such as water, soil, or air. A new species of epiphytic plant was discovered by scientists of Botanical Survey of India. Bhutan's king visited Kamakhya temple. Considered the oldest of 51 Shakti Peeth, the temple is located in Nilachal Hills in Guwahati, Assam. Before we go, it's time to put your knowledge to the test in today's segment of Test Your Learning. Thank you for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of News Today. To get the answers to today's quiz and to download the PDF of News Today, make sure to check out the links in the description below.